Good evening. You might take your Bibles and turn to 1 Kings 18. That's where we're going to look at tonight. Lord willing, we'll be able to make it through 18 and 19 tonight as we study together. We're going to be mostly focusing on the prophet Elijah and him at Mount Carmel and Mount Horeb, or Mount Sinai, as we may better know it. And so we'll be picking up there in just a moment. Now, I don't have my chart tonight. I left my computer at home, but during what king's reign are we in as we pick up in 1 Kings 18? Ahab, that's right. And Ahab is a very wicked king of Israel. Now, for the most part, maybe not for the most part, a lot of the prophets that we deal with are to the southern kingdom. And we get more probably of the writings of southern prophets because they last longer as a kingdom. Judah lasts longer as a kingdom. But Elijah is a prophet to the northern kingdom during the era of Ahab. He and Elisha will probably be the two most prominent divided kingdom prophets that aren't writing prophets. Elijah and Elisha are pretty major figures here that are referenced often in the New Testament, or at least the things that they do. All right, so Elijah is going to be who we're looking at. What does Elijah proclaim in 1 Kings 17 is going to be the case during Ahab's reign? It's not going to rain. Now, why is that the thing?
God that was the Canaanite God that overcame.
That's right.
Power.
That's right. So Baal, the god that they were worshiping, was the god of the storms and things like that. And so Elijah, one writer I was reading said, no, there was no better way to throw down the gauntlet in front of Baal than to say there's not going to be any rain. And I also think when we look at passages that look forward to the days of judgment that were going to come, one of the purposes was to get repentance. If you look at like Leviticus 26, there are these various stages. If you don't obey, then this stuff will happen. And if you don't listen, it'll get 7 times worse, and then this stage of thing will happen. And if you don't change, it'll get 7 times worse, and then this stuff will happen. And the idea was not to just be punishing just for the sake of punishing, but for the sake of getting them to turn in the right direction. And so that's the thing here for sure. So we're going to come to chapter 18 now. Anything I should say else we should say in advance of that. And we're going to start, let's just read verses 1 through 6 if we can. And then we might could read more than that. 1 through 6 will work. Now it happened after many days that the word of Yahweh came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, "Go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the face of the earth." So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria. And Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household. Now Obadiah feared Yahweh greatly. And it happened that when Jezebel was cutting down the prophets of Yahweh, Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50s in a cave and sustained them with bread and water. Then Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs of water and to all the valleys. Perhaps we will find grass and keep the horses and mules alive and not have to cut down some of the cattle." So they divided the land between them to pass through it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. All right, what do you notice about in this situation that is maybe interesting or surprising to you? Okay, yeah, so you got Obadiah, who looks to be basically like the right-hand man of Ahab here, and he's described as faithful to the Lord, fearing Yahweh. What else is surprising? That's a great point. What else? How many prophets are there? 100 prophets hidden by 50s in a cave. And I love this, that what does Obadiah do for these prophets? He's providing food and water. Obadiah is a better provider than Baal is. Just so, here's Baal, supposed to be the god of the storms, and Baal can't provide water, but this guy named Obadiah can. And I don't know how he's doing that. I don't know what access he has, but he's trusting the Lord and able to do some of that. So Ahab is pretty desperate. Now, what's God sending Elijah to say to Ahab?
Rain's coming.
Rain's coming, right? Now, why would it be necessary for Elijah to go and make sure everybody understands exactly why the rain's coming? Yeah, right. 3 years of crying out to Baal, and finally he answered, right? And I think Elijah's going to kind of like mock that concept later in the chapter, like, where's Baal? You know, but the idea here is Elijah's coming to reveal that God is relenting. He is showing mercy, not because they've repented, it doesn't look like to me, but because because he's trying to get them to see not only the judging side, the justice side, but also the mercy side, so that in some way they will be pulled closer to him. Anything through verse 6? All right, you can take us however far you want to.
Okay, verse 7, and as Obadiah was on the way, behold, Elijah met him. And Obadiah recognized him and fell on his face and said, Is it you, my lord Elijah? And he answered him, It is I. Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And he said, How have I sinned that you would give your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord has not sent to seek you. And when they would say he is not here, he would take an oath of the kingdom or nation that they had not found you. And now you say, Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And as soon as I have gone from you, that the Spirit of the Lord will carry you, I know not where. And so when I come and tell Ahab, and he cannot find you, he will kill me. Although I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. Has it not been told, my Lord, that what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord, how I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets by 50s in a cave and fed them with bread and water? And now you say, Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here, and he will kill me. Ahab is made people take an oath on their life that they have not seen Elijah. And if they get caught, they're probably going to be killed, and Obadiah knows that. I can't even read my own notes here. He was afraid that the Lord would hide Elijah again before Ahab and Elijah met up, and that Obadiah would get the blame for it because he had already hid 100 prophets. So, he was really afraid there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm afraid Obadiah thinks that it will look like he's cried wolf. Like Elijah's here, and then he knows God is with Elijah, swoops him away, and now Obadiah is like, he was right here, I promise.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. He's going to be blamed for hiding him.
That's right.
Like he hid the others.
Yeah. All right, so verse 17, this is a tremendous interaction here between Ahab and Elijah. It happened when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said to him, Is this you troubler of Israel? And he said, this is Elijah responding, I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, because you have forsaken the commandments of Yahweh and you have followed the Baals. So now then, send and gather to me all Israel at Mount Carmel, together with 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of the Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. This is kind of the key discussion for the rest of the text, and we're going to see how this all plays out. But notice what Ahab asks. Is that you troubler of Israel? And what's Elijah's response to that accusation?
I'm not a troubler of you and your father's house.
That's right. So how can Elijah say, I'm not the one causing trouble? What's the basis of that? That sin is the problem, right? Elijah trying to fix things isn't the problem. Now, it would look like to Ahab, because he's on the wrong side of all this, that Elijah is really trying to stir things up and provoke and anger and all that. But when you think about who the troublemaker is the person leading away from the truth, not the person trying to bring people back. Even though so many times it's the person being like, whoa, 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 we can't do that, that is thought of as the troubler. And Elijah says, no, you forsook the Lord. You went after Baal. That is the great trouble that's been caused. And so where are they going to meet for a challenge? Mount Carmel. All right, so if you've been in drill class, you know where Mount Carmel is. Again, I don't have my map, but it's that little bump on the going up the Mediterranean coast. And Mount Carmel really is kind of outside of main Israelite territory. That doesn't mean it wasn't ever under Israelite control, but it's really kind of a Tyre, Sidonian controlled, Phoenician really controlled place. And if I understand correctly from the historians that I can read about it, it was basically like home court for Baal. In fact, there are some records where it's referred to in Assyrian as Baal's Bluff, basically, is what it's called. And so he's going to meet, it's just going to be him, personally, as a human-wise, him versus 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. I think we'll mostly just see the 450 prophets of Baal. But notice what these people's connection is. Where do they eat? At Jezebel's table, right? So Elijah, from just this initial kind of setup of the challenge, is putting it, I mean, they're in as favorable of conditions as they can. Here you've got the people, they're on their home court, right? This is where Baal's supposed to be his strongest. There's plenty of them, right? If power's in the numbers, they got way more than Elijah has with him at the moment. If the power is in being connected to the centralizing authority, they've got the power, right? They're right at the center of power. And so Elijah says, we're going to meet there, and there's going to be a challenge that follows after that. Okay. Anything through there?
He's going to go on and let them do the choose first and all that to make it look like they have the advantage, but they never do.
That's right.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And if it gets you off topic, just wait till later to answer.
Okay.
But we talked about Baal quite a bit up to this point. Do you happen to know, like, how far this Baal worship go? Like, what group of people would have actually started this Baal worship? And how far back would that have went? Do we know that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how far back, but it predated their coming into the land. Baal was already being worshipped. I would say that the main source of this probably was the Phoenicians, like Tyre and Sidon, and that area. I think that's where the origin of Baal was. I can do more looking into that, but as far as I know, he was. Now, that worship, he may have gone by other names or whatever. The Phoenicians spread through a lot of the Mediterranean world. So I don't know how far geographically it spread, but I would imagine pretty far. Like Carthage, like North Africa, that was settled by Phoenicians. So I would not be surprised if we wouldn't come across Baal worship even that far away. But as far as timeline, it would be way before the Israelites came into the land. I can't think of any references like during Abraham's day.
It's mentioned in Numbers 25.
Okay, yeah. Oh, Baal worship at Peor. Yeah.
Peor, yes.
Yeah, and so those would be Moabites worshiping Baal.
Right.
I think we would think of it as basically a broadly Canaanite idol, but I think that the origins are Phoenician, but I'll look more into that. But that's a great question. It would have been very prominent. Yes, sir.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Why is the number 100 prophets? Is that for a reason, or is that a certain number?
That Obadiah has hid. I'm not sure, other than maybe that was what he could manage and find. I was talking to Collier this morning. They're not here. Katie wasn't feeling well, but it's interesting. Collier made mention. There's already been quite the eradication of prophets in the Northern Kingdom. The fact that there's still 100 left is impressive in some ways, I think we would say. And he made this point, and I've not really thought about this before, at how many prophets were at work in Israel. And so somebody a couple of weeks ago maybe asked, like, how do they know what they're supposed to be doing? How do they know what's right? There's 100 faithful prophets there in that cave. So, no, I don't know why that specific number other than just Obadiah's capacity to maintain that. I will say when we look at chapter 19, the Lord will reference 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. I wouldn't assume that all those are prophets, but that's a lot of people who are faithful to the Lord. But that's a good question. I don't know I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily draw some like symbolic thing from that. I would just basically just take that as a report of the number, but it may mean something more deeply than that. I don't know.
I have some questions to go along, written down here to go along with what you mentioned there, Kobe. Who was Baal? Where did he come from? Where did he get his power?
He's mentioned a lot.
Yeah. Did he ever create anything? How did he rule? Did he ever bless a servant that anyone that served him? Did he ever defeat an enemy? Did he ever answer a cry? Was there even such a being? He never saw anything, heard anything. He never loved anybody. But Baal worship was popular. Why is that? But there you go. It's just basically a celebration of self. Kind of looked religious, I guess. I don't know, but you could ask all those questions about God, and you'd have an answer, wouldn't you? Especially the part about worship. Worship of God is calm and earnest and self-controlled and pure. And Baal worship was nothing like that.
Carved image, basically.
Yeah, just nearly a free-for-all, or I guess it was a free-for-all.
Well, when you look at it, like in Numbers 25 that you pointed out, the way in which they engage in the false worship of Baal was sexual immorality. And I think that was probably common with a lot of the false gods. You can read about that in Greco-Roman, like New Testament era false religion, a huge appeal. I would say that probably Baal and Molech are the two that we see the most as far as false gods that are put on. And Baal was as sexually immoral as you could be as far as in that kind of worship. And then Molech, which is absolutely brutal. I think he was basically the god of war and things like that. And they would sacrifice children. I mean, it was absolutely horrific. But those are the two primary ones I think that you see. I was looking, and in Genesis, there are a couple of things named after Baal, like a person or a city. So it may even be, that was like days of Jacob and Esau. So I don't know if that's a reference to the Baal that we're reading about or something else, but it's interesting that there's already references, like terms being derived from that. But anyway, that's a great question. All right. So any other questions so far before we jump right back into the text? Okay. Let's see here. Did you have anything else? You want to take us? You can start where were we? Like verse 20.
So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word. That's probably a good place to stop.
Yeah.
So how long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him. If Baal, then follow him.
I can tell you right exactly where Baal comes from. It comes from the devil.
Yeah.
And he placed it in their mind over and over and over till they absolutely believed.
Yep. I think that's right. Yeah. That's very good. And I like in verse 21 how he's not just saying, well, what he's saying is you're trying to go back and forth. You're trying to do both. And what I think anybody else say anything different than limping, faltering. The idea is like you can almost see them like it's difficult to be going back and forth. in fact, it's so limping, it's impossible, right? I mean, they think that they're able to like limp over here and worship the Lord and then go right over here and worship Baal. And it's like, you can't do both those things because they really stand in direct contrast to one another. And I like the implications here. If Yahweh is God, then follow him. And Elijah leaves it open. If Baal is God, follow him, right? Like we want the truth to be determining which direction we're going to go. And it's almost like they're trying to hedge their bets, right? It's like, well, if Yahweh's really God, we want to stick with him. And if Baal's really God, we want to stick with him. And Elijah's like, no. Let's quit all this nonsense. Let's see who's the real one, and then just follow him, and don't worry about the other one after that. So,
Another thing about, and I'm not trying to take over.
yeah, no, that's no worries.
Another thing about that too is we face this today in so many ways. This very same situation. There's false gods all over the place that a lot of people don't even realize is a false god.
That's right.
And we have to realize that there's a distinction there. Are we going to serve television,
Yeah.
social media, all of that stuff?
Yeah.
Or are we going to serve God?
Yeah, well, you think so? We have these names that they gave to these old gods, but the gods haven't changed. That people are the false gods. You know, Baal centered around sexual immorality. We notice a lot of like people just failing to honor the false god of sexual immorality. You know, and people are, and maybe some people are limping between two, like thinking they can be involved in both. Even Baal's other identity of fertility we might associate with like production and power and money and things like that. People quit worshiping that God. No, we don't call it Baal. We just call it the thing that Baal represented. And I think that's a great point. So whether it's sexual immorality or power or money or comfort or whatever the thing is, and oftentimes I think social media just, like you said, enhances that. Like, greed has never not been a problem for people. But boy, social media has helped enhance that, has an access to, well, they've got this and longing for that and coveting that and that sort of thing. So I think you're exactly right that people, Jesus said, nobody can serve two masters. You already had that term too? I'm sorry. You can read the rest of it.
No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and whatever. Money's there, but or mammon. But
and the interesting thing is Jesus says you can't do it, right? Like it's not like really difficult to do it. No, you can't do both. You can't serve that one and the Lord, whatever the other one is, mammon or sexual immorality or whatever.
Well, what can help you from doing that? What can help you to keep you from doing that? Limp. Yeah. What can you do to help you from
Keep from limping.
What you can do is you can study the Bible night and day and know every word of the Bible. That's the only way you can fight the devil. It's know exactly what the Bible says about a situation the devil puts up before you. And if you don't know that, he can overcome you. If you know that, you can tell him that, and he'll depart from you and leave for a while.
Yeah. There's such thing as a good habit. Make a habit out of reading the Bible, but make a habit out of.
The study of the Bible, the closer you get to God, the easier it is to do with the earthly things that it ain't important.
Yeah. Yeah. Make a habit out of praying and studying and self-control, anything.
Well, and draw the conclusion that Elijah calls it. If the Lord is God, follow him. Now, if the other pursuits that people devote themselves to, if that's going to really pay off in the end, follow that, right? If that's the thing that's going to make it, at the end of life, and you're going to look back and you say, boy, I'm glad I invested in all that. Okay. But that's not the way it's going to work. And so invest in the thing that's going to matter, the only thing that's going to matter ultimately. So basically, the Lord being God does not leave any room for half-hearted service or divided loyalty. And they don't say a word. They don't respond at all to that. I think the people have been thinking this whole time, well, we're going to serve both and we'll be all right. And maybe this is just hitting them like a ton of bricks. Like, oh, that's not an option on the table. And so they don't say anything. And maybe that's all right at this moment. They want to see who has the evidence. So if it's all right, we'll just summarize. Y'all know this story well. This is one of those Old Testament stories that even though I grew up, we didn't study the Old Testament like this when I was growing up, but I knew this story, right? So we know this, that Elijah challenged them. And so what's the challenge going to be? Basically, kind of lay it out, somebody.
You pray to your God for rain, or you ask your God.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so they're going to set up an altar, right? They're going to put an animal on it, and they're not going to light the fire, basically. Now, this is interesting because you would say, well, why would Baal be the one giving the fire? I thought he was the rain guy. He's the storm guy. So he's supposed to be in charge of rain and lightning, right? So this is not like creating a extra difficulty for Baal. Supposedly, Elijah is giving Baal. Yale is not, well, they are kind of pagan, but they're not an idol. Well, maybe they are for some. Okay, Baal, not giving Baal, he's not making it more difficult for him. He's supposed to be, like this ideally for Baal is like, this is where his territory is. He can send the lightning. So the idea is they're going to create these two altars. Elijah will have one, and the prophets of Baal will have one, and they will cry out for fire to come down. Now, they agree to that. Look at verse 26. They cry out, "Oh, Baal, answer us," in the middle of the verse. Think about this, the emphasis that's put here. But there was no voice, and no one answered, and they limped about the altar which they had made. That limp word there is the same word as how long you'll limp in between two opinions. Supposedly this was some kind of ceremonial dance to like get Baal interested, but the scriptures look at it and go, they just kept limping. Like it wasn't some ceremonial prayer dance. It was limping around an altar. And so you can just see I would say silliness, but it's stronger than silliness, just the foolishness of this, right? So verse 27, Elijah mocked them and said, "Call out with a loud voice, for he is a god. Either he's occupied," or my text says relieving himself. Yours might say gone aside or something like that. Or is on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and needs to be awakened. Louder. Could he be daydreaming? Maybe asleep. Maybe he's out of town. Maybe he's in the bathroom. Like, just imagine. We don't get a lot of these scenes in the scriptures, but imagine Elijah just standing there poking them like this, and the frustration that they must have felt in this moment. Then look at verse 28. They cried with a loud voice, gashed themselves according to their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out on them. Absolute, frantic, raving, frenzied. And then notice verse 29 again. Now it happened when noon had passed, that they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifices. I think we're talking about like 6 hours here. But there was no voice, no one answered, and no one paid attention. You see that? There's nobody there. Nobody's listening. There's no response. Nobody answered. Nobody heard. Nobody was acknowledging them. Nobody was paying attention. This is the failure of idols, whether that's old idols or it's our current idols that we just don't put the labels on them. Wealth, power, relationships, health, pleasure. They will not hear. They will not answer. They will not pay attention in the ways that matter the most, in the ways that really matter. Okay. Anything else on that? All right, now how does Elijah, all right, they're done. They've had all day. Now Elijah's turn. What does he do? Yeah, pour water. 12 stones of water. So this is several gallons of water. I don't know. Does anybody have a note? So like 7.7 liters is a seah. And so that's the size of the trench. And then they fill 4 pitchers and they keep pouring it on. They do it 3 times. So you've got water flowing around this. So basically, Elijah is saying, we're going to make this as difficult as possible. Now, I'm interested in where they found the water, given all this. But Mount Carmel is right on the Mediterranean Sea. So it's possible that they're even going all the way down to the Mediterranean Sea and getting salt water and pouring it all over it. And this should make things more difficult. Look at verses 36 through 38. Now, it happened at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, "O Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Today let it be known you are God in Israel, and that I am your slave, and I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Yahweh, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Yahweh, are God, and that you have turned their heart back again. Then the fire of Yahweh fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust and licked up the water that was in the trench. So God, the Lord, is demonstrated to be the God, the true God, and he hears, he acts. Baal is a delusion. He's a fraud. The fire consumes it. I think when we get that idea of the fire consuming, like I think of right before Nadab and Abihu, when God consumes the offering in pleasure. When Solomon builds the temple, he consumes the offering, pleased with it. Here, Elijah brings this offering, and it's consumed by God. God is showing that there is a way back. And that way back is by saying he's the true God and worshiping him. And how do the people respond? They fall on their faces. The Lord is God. The Lord is God. Yahweh, he is God. Yahweh, he is God. And that's going to change things. At least it appears that it's going to change things. And it will maybe for a bit. All right. You want to take us? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
I was gonna say, like you're saying, it's just a simple prayer. I mean, it's meaningful.
Yeah.
But it's
That's right.
simple.
There's nothing frantic, nothing erratic, no blood lancing himself or cutting himself with a sword or limping around the altar, nothing like that. Just reaching out with a prayer.
One more thing I would say about that too is when I read this and I think about those people that were on the wrong side,
Mm-hmm.
I think about the number of people that had to have been doing that just because other people were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about how we are a lot, how we are today a lot of times. You know, Timmy mentioned a while ago, what can we do to keep from faltering? Who we hang around and who we spend our time with has a lot to do with that, I think. We've got to be comfortable with our faith and not be afraid to stand up for what's right.
That's right. That's very good. That's very good. So, and this will go with that, and we'll see it more in chapter 19. Elijah is doing that, basically. I mean, at least from his perspective, he's standing, the Lord is with him, of course, but personally, he's standing on his own. I think he thinks this ought to be the decisive thing, right? And the people act like it's going to be, and then they don't really change. And why? Because Jezebel doesn't really change, and Ahab doesn't change, and the prophets that are left, I'm not sure there are many left after all this, don't change. And the people, they fall into the same old pattern all over again. And so it's like, you know, we sometimes say, and we've made mention of this, boy, if I could have seen that, I wouldn't have any problems with doubt. I wouldn't have any problems with my faith or anything like that. Here, these people literally see it put before them as clear as day. And they don't stay faithful. And that will ultimately lead Elijah, I think in chapter 19, to have a whole bunch of questions. Because it is difficult to stand on your own. And yet the Lord's going to encourage him to do that and say, you're not alone, right? There are people doing right. We just don't always see it. But you're exactly right that the influence of other people on us can have a dire impact. Okay.
And then they get to see the prophets of Baal get
Yes.
slaughtered.
That's right. Yeah, Baal doesn't defend them there either. He doesn't provide any fire there for them to help. All right. Anything else through like verse 40? Any questions about that? Comments? So the key theme of this whole thing, you can see it mentioned several times, is demonstrating that the Lord, that Yahweh is the true God. That has been clearly demonstrated. Now we come to verse 41. Brother Jimmy, I'm kind of sucking all the air.
You're good.
If you'd like
You're
to
good.
take that.
And Elijah said to Ahab, go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, and he bowed himself down on the earth and put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. And at the 7th time he said, behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea. And he said, go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, lest the rain stop you. And in a little while the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain, and Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. I suppose they hadn't had anything to eat all day, so he tells Ahab to get him something to eat and build up his strength, because he's fixing to have to run from the rain, I guess. Elijah had already let them know that he would let them know when the rain was coming. That was back in chapter 17. And he's letting them know right now. It's been 3.5 years. And they haven't repented in that 3.5 years. He goes up and prays for the rain to come. He humbles himself down to the ground. I took that to mean, or maybe I read it, that he knew he came from the dust of the ground, and that they needed the water. He could hear the rain coming, but he still prayed for it. He had no doubt. It was his anticipation. I want to read a couple of verses. Colossians about prayer here. And this prayer this happened 7 times here. Colossians 4:2, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. They were being watchful, weren't they? He was telling them to go and watch for the rain. And 1 Thessalonians, let me find it here. You probably know it. 5:17, pray without ceasing. Always be confident in a prayer. Be patient. And be constant. And that's my lesson about Elijah's prayer there.
And specifically referenced in James 5, right? The effective prayer of a righteous man, you know what I'm talking about.
Fervent.
Fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And points to this as occasion. And it's interesting.
Right.
The basis of his prayer is not just some random request. It's in keeping with the promises of God. And when Elijah ties into that promise and prays in view of what God had prophesied and promised, then there is good response for him and for Israel. So that's helpful. Okay. Any comments or questions through 1 Kings 18? Appreciate all of the... Yeah, go ahead.
I'll ask a question. Why did Elijah run ahead of?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's not just like that he did. I think he is spiritually empowered to run faster, right? Like it's that he is given greater capacity to run. So it's interesting. I think Ahab might be at a moment right here where things might be turning in his mind, because it's almost the picture of Ahab following Elijah, isn't it? Like he's leading the way and Ahab's kind of following behind. And maybe it's just kind of a figurative way of showing Elijah's out ahead. He's running before Ahab. Ahab's in a chariot, and Elijah's given the power to run faster than him, and Ahab follows him all the way into Jezreel. So I think this might be like a demonstration of here is the way things could be, right? It could be Elijah going out ahead and Ahab following him. Can't wait. Ready for a turn in Israel. Big things are on the horizon. Lots of change, right? That's what it looks like as we close chapter 18.
Yeah. One thing for sure, he was not glorifying Ahab.
No. Maybe it's kind of like a call to Ahab, like, hey, let's go this way. Maybe. And certainly Ahab was in the greatest position possible to have seen all this. He's there, and not only does he see the prophets of Baal fail and Elijah succeed, but then he hears Elijah talking about going up and seeing the cloud that start, and Ahab's right there, a part of all of that. So Ahab, the king, is in the best position to see this and maybe lead Israel in a different direction. There's just one problem. He's married. No, that's not the problem. He's married to a particular kind of person, right? He's married to Jezebel. And so we won't have time to cover all of chapter 19, but I do want to just introduce the idea here of what's going on as we walk through the text. In verses 1 through 3, Jezebel, what is her reaction to all of this? She's going to kill Elijah. All right? It's like, Jezebel, did you not hear what we just told you? Did you not hear all that information? Don't care. Doesn't matter, right? She has already chosen her direction. If I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow, so may the gods do to me and even more. She is asking, if I can't kill him, just go ahead and kill me. Well, that'll be taken care of. But it will be by the Lord. Now, notice this. In verse 3, he was afraid. Other translations don't say he was afraid. They say he saw. And the reason I want to indicate that is that I'm not sure that Elijah is necessarily concerned about dying. Why would I say that? Why do you think that I would say that? What does he pray for when he gets to his stop in the wilderness? He wants to die. All right, so it's like, well, if that's the prayer, why run all the way into the wilderness? Why not just let Jezebel take care of it? I don't think the prayer is I don't think Elijah's fear is as much him dying. I think his fear is Jezebel being the one who gets to kill him. I think he's broken. I think he thinks he's failed. And he doesn't want that Jezebel to have the success or the victory or the honor of being the one that takes him out. He says, if my work's not going to go well, if I'm not going to be able to accomplish the task before me, let the Lord just take my life. And so it is a fear, but it's not like a fear of he's scared to die. It's a brokenness at seeing. I mean, it would be like, it would be like, standing on a mountain and seeing God answer the prayer and all the people saying, Yahweh is God, Yahweh is God. And then instead of Jezebel saying, we need to repent, saying, I'm going to kill you. It's like, I can't win. I can't accomplish what I want to accomplish. That's the sadness here, I think, that Elijah feels. And when he takes off into the wilderness. But what does the Lord do for him? Does he kill him? No. In fact, what does he do? Yeah, he gives him bread and he gives him water. And this is verse 6 and 7. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. Actually, so sometimes I think we think of him running to Sinai or Horeb as like a sign that Elijah's just giving up. I think he was giving up in some ways. But not because he didn't trust God anymore, not because he wasn't trying to be faithful, but just because he thought he couldn't accomplish the task that was before him. He actually goes to Mount Horeb by angelic instruction, by the Lord's instruction to him to go. And we'll be able to look more at what happens there. But where is Mount Horeb? What is Mount Horeb? Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, that's right. Mount Sinai is, of course, where they received the law. And I think that there is a plan and that there is a purpose at work in him going to Horeb and Sinai that we'll see play out. Do you have anything through like verse 7 or 8 to pick up on? Any questions through verse 8 or so? Okay. All right. Well, we got about 2 minutes. But I think we ought to just put a pin in it there, don't you think? That'd be a good place to wait.
That's where I stopped.
Okay. Stop getting ready. Okay. Well, then we got to stop. No, okay. So we'll pick up next time. And we're ahead in our schedule anyway because I messed it all up. So we're plenty ahead. But we'll pick up there in the middle of chapter 19 next week in verse 9 and look at Elijah at Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai.
Yeah. You might look at it as interesting that he didn't eat again for 40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah, which sounds like somebody else on Mount Sinai, doesn't it? Sounds like Moses on Mount Sinai. Yeah. So maybe there's a connection, Moses on Mount Sinai and Elijah on Mount Sinai. But we'll ponder that some more next time. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.